Louis the Pious became co-emperor in 813 alongside his father Charlemagne, who had been crowned the first Holy Roman Emperor in 800 by Pope Leo III. When his father died the following year, Louis got his reign off to a good start, and it could have even been described as successful up until about 830, when his sons would revolt against him, and he would have a particularly turbulent relationship with his son Lothair, and would even be captive to him twice, although Louis regained power both times due to Lothair's inability to govern. Louis was born in the late 770s, probably 778. The chronicler Einhard, who wrote the Life of Charlemagne, the best primary source about Charles the Great, touches upon the education of Charlemagne's children. Charlemagne was unusually close to his children and took them with him on campaign, rather than leaving them behind in the care of the nobility, where they might have been expected to receive their education. However, in the care of their mother and father, Louis and his siblings were still taught to read and write. As they grew older, the boys were taught the skills that would be expected of them as princes and warriors, such as learning to ride horses, the art of warfare, such as handling weapons, and going hunting, the favourite pastime of the nobility in the Middle Ages. The girls were predictably taught more domesticated skills. Death was a common thing in the 8th and 9th centuries, and Einhard mentions the death of 3 of Louis' siblings, 2 brothers, Charles and Pepin, and a sister. Given there seems to have been a strong bond between the children and their father, it's fair to say the losses would have been felt sorely. The death of 3 siblings occurred before Charlemagne's death in 814. As I mentioned, death was commonplace throughout the Middle Ages, and parents burying their children was not unusual. Unsurprisingly for someone nicknamed the Pious, Louis was a mild-mannered man, described by William of Malmesbury as being unmercifully persecuted by his son Lothair. When Louis's father Charlemagne died, Louis had been in Aquitaine when the message arrived to him to inform him that he was now sole ruler. His succession went uncontested. An important early boost for Louis was the forming of an alliance with Byzantine Emperor Leo V, who was still relatively new on the throne himself. It was perhaps this that encouraged Leo to seek a friendship with the emperor in the west. Byzantine history is full to the brim of deposed emperors and rulers meeting a violent end. Securing a treaty with Louis would bolster his position. It was an agreement that would be mutually beneficial, as although during the 14-year reign of Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor, there have been several attempts from the Eastern Roman Empire to secure agreements. The relations between the East and Western empires would not be easy throughout their histories, so Leo and Louis coming to terms early in their reigns would suit both. Things continued to go well for Louis. He obliged in helping 2 deposed Danish kings, and he received homage from the nobility throughout his kingdom. The next port of call was Rome, where a plot had been uncovered against the Pope, who had done the righteous and merciful thing you might have expected of a Pope, and promptly slaughtered his enemies that had plotted to murder him. Eventually the situation calmed down. The papacy in the 9th century was always volatile, and a bit like the situation with the Byzantine emperors, popes were very often opposed, sometimes deposed, and occasionally met a violent end. Quickly calming matters in Rome was crucial for Louis and peace in his kingdom. In 816, Louis put down 2 further revolts, the first by the Slavs, and the latter by the Basques. The latter had been frustrated by Louis's removal of their corrupt ruler, but they were successfully dealt with by Louis's forces. Later that year, Louis met the new pope, where they too made an alliance, Again, Louis seems to have been fully aware of the importance of stability in Rome, and making friendship with Pope Stephen was the wisest course of action. In 817, Louis welcomed envoys to his court of the son of the Muslim ruler in Spain, who sought peace in the region, and also that year, another envoy from Constantinople sought his advice on a dilemma for Leo V. Louis had a fortunate escape when he was walking on an arcade along with many others, which collapsed, killing and injuring many, with the emperor coming away with only bumps and bruises. Then, following the custom of his father, Louis crowned his eldest son Lothair co-emperor, perhaps with that narrow escape in mind, and his own mortality, and thus started the beginning of his troubles. Lothair would have been around 22 at the time of his coronation. A prince of this age would have been, or expected to be, itching for power. At the time of Lothair being made co-emperor, his brothers Pepin and Louis were given Aquitaine and Bavaria, respectively, with Lothair their overlord. For the time being, Louis continued to manage his kingdom. His nephew, the King of Italy, rose up in revolt, which was swiftly put down, and his son Pepin dealt with an uprising in Gascony. A problem of a different kind befell the Franks, when a huge and persistent rainfall led to floods and the failings of crops and vegetables, leading to widespread hunger and starvation. In 821, Lothair was married to the daughter of the Count of Tours, before he was sent by his father to Worms. At this point, Lothair was still compliant to his father, and after dealing with matters in Italy, he went to meet the Pope on behalf of Louis in 823. Before leaving Italy, Lothair established new laws, which obviously gained the approval of his father, who then sent a nobleman to enforce them. Matters would continue in much the same vein up until about 830. Lothair up to this point had seemed to be a loyal co-ruler, carrying out his father's wishes, while other rulers, such as the Bulgar Khan, continued to seek alliances with Louis. But in 830, matters would turn against Louis. Whether Lothair had been fully loyal and genuinely aggrieved, or whether he now, at the age of about 35, felt he had an opportunity to seize full control of the empire, is difficult to say. But to me, Lothair seems to have manufactured an uprising to suit his own ends, and it seems to have also suited two of his brothers, Pepin and Louis, who also rose in revolt. Their initial move was against their stepmother and uncles, who they forced into a convent and monastery, respectively, in Aquitaine, guarded by Pepin. Next they took their father and brother prisoner, albeit in kinder conditions, with them even sending monks to keep Charles, at that time aged about 7, company, and possibly hoped he would then choose a religious life. That didn't come to fruition, as he would go on to become a Holy Roman Emperor himself, but he would have to continue his struggles, even after the death of Louis the Pious. However, the deposition was not successful, and the governance went to pot. Louis was quickly restored to oversee matters. Chastised, Lothair had seen his followers, who helped him with his coup, either executed or exiled, and he was once more sent to Italy. The situation kicked off again in 832, when Louis, through what can be considered pretty poor judgment in the circumstances, took Aquitaine off Pepin and gave it to Charles. Once more, he and his youngest son found themselves captive. Again, Lothair lost control of matters, and spent his time in sole power squabbling with his brothers and other members of his following. Louis and Charles were once more released, and Lothair did a runner, Acting more sensibly this time, Louis accepted Pepin's homage when he came back to his father, and restored to him Aquitaine. Lothair continued to revolt up until about the middle of 834, when eventually he saw that he didn't have enough backing after the nobility had evidently grew fed up of what had been a largely needless civil war caused by a weak kingship and a temperamental son. When Louis died in 840, he must have been a tired and weary man. He would have been around at the time of his death, about the age of 62, a good age for the 9th century. Troublesome sons was not an uncommon matter in the early Middle Ages or throughout the entire medieval period. In fact, Louis had demonstrated good diplomatic skills and kept good control of his kingdom for over 15 years, but to be deposed twice shows a weakness in his kingship. He had put down numerous revolts, but seemed to have had a weak spot when it came to his sons, Lothair in particular. Perhaps we can't be too hard on Louis, as the headstrong Lothair would continue to quarrel with his brothers after he had become sole emperor.